Hi everyone, and welcome to our next generation webinar series. So these webinars are following on from the events that we've just completed around the country, so if you attended them, it is the same content. If you haven't, then great, and if you want to share it with your peers, then you're more than welcome to. Today I'm going to be covering our next generation SCADA, and I'm Andy Graham, and I'm the Wonderware Product Manager for Solutions PT. Before we get into some of the latest details, I thought I'd start with InTouch. InTouch is still very much a very well-known product. It's still it's still a leading SCADA, still the most sold SCADA in the world. It's in the most number of plants. If you have a look, our InTouch solution is like any other typical HMI or SCADA solution. So a typical screen you might see is something like that on the left-hand side. What InTouch and Wonderware have tried to do now is introduce the situational awareness design concept. And this just shows a slightly different way of working. So actually the same information is displayed on the left-hand side as the right-hand side, but you can see it's very easy to diagnose and understand what's happening on the right-hand side. But these are things that are built into the solution. So there's an extensive graphic library that enables you to drop a lot of these out of the box. It has been around for a long time, as I've already mentioned. InTouch is renowned for its ease of use. It always has been. You can pretty much pick it up and start using it. The graphical capabilities are very feature-rich, very powerful, and they allow you to do things like .NET scripting and embed .NET controls inside of them. And they are vector-based, so they scale quite nicely when you change the shape of them or change the size of them. It's very highly integrated with System Platform. In fact, it is the client interface to our System Platform environment up until this 2017 release, which I'll come on to later. I've already mentioned the out-of-the-box ready-to-use library of symbols, so there is that extensive library there with that situational awareness. And they allow you to connect to your SCADA anywhere in the world with the use of something like InTouch Access Anywhere through a HTML5 web browser. Secure remote access, and that's something that a lot of our customers are adopting these days. Wonderware makes sure that they protect your engineering investment through continuous research and development, and they always make sure you can migrate from previous versions up to the latest. And it will coexist with InTouch OMI, which is the latest product that I'm going to be showing you today. There have been some changes that have come with InTouch 2017, so it's not a case of they're just focused on the System Platform product. InTouch is continually being developed in parallel to the System Platform solution, so you can still migrate to that latest version. There's some engineering efficiencies that have been introduced there, things like the script editors now much more intuitive in terms of things like IntelliSense, so it will do things like autocomplete. It'll tell you when things are wrong. There are application templates that allow you to choose an application template to design an application from scratch, if you like, but designed to the same banners or navigation if you've already got that implemented in one of your applications. And it comes with some quite nice templates built into the solution. There's also window frames that allow you to do something very similar, but on a window level. So if you want the same look and feel for every window, use one of the window frames that you've set up. They have changed the licensing technology at this release. It's all centralized management. It's much easier to manage, much easier to quote, so that the quotes will be a lot simpler. There's less part codes to it. I think you'll find that it's actually a much nicer experience to deal with. And there is some runtime and user experience updates as well. So in terms of usability, you've got things like pan and zoom, so you can choose particular windows to have the ability to pinch and zoom on a tablet to have a look in, or even scroll in through a mouse wheel. They've updated the IT compliance, and the connectivity is the same as the OI servers that get released, but there's more of it now. So what I'm now going to move on to is the System Platform 2017 release, and this is the largest evolution of the software in over 15 years. Probably the biggest change to come since the original release of InTouch. There's a lot of changes in here. But just before we start, just thought it would be useful to go over a little bit of a background about what System Platform is. So it's a object-based design solution that allows you to configure your plant model in a logical representation of exactly what's happening on the plant floor and get the real-time and historical information back from your system. And it's extremely scalable. There's a lot of standards that you can drive through that if that's something that you adhere to. Typically for the hybrid process market, there's things built into being able to lock objects if you want to make sure those standards are replicated throughout different lines or even different sites if you want to share those objects with different sites. It's a content management solution, so you can get a lot of scalability out of it by adding additional features as and when you require them. So if you get the System Platform environment in place, you need something like an energy monitoring solution, and you bolt that into the system, and you add as you go along. There's a bit about people, processes, and technology here, and typically when it comes to SCADA, there is a lot about the technology, because the technology has to be good to enable the other two things. But the technology here allows us to do things like large-scale software developments. So things that we have to do as parts of our processes, we have to be able to distribute our software. It enables our people to be able to do that and manage and control them at the same time. And they've made great steps in improving these things at this release. And there's endless possibilities with it. You can forever make it extensible. So you can bolt in third-party systems. You can do like a systems of systems approach. What is your vision at the end of the day? What would you like to get out of your SCADA? System Platform is that package for that. And it is best-in-class software. It's commercial off the shelf. It's easy to use. It's getting even easier. Again, they allow that migration path going up to the latest releases. We're not tied to PLC vendors. We've never been. And it alleviates skills gaps because you can get the same look and feel very easily through the standards that you can implement in the approach. So if we move on to the 2017 release and look at some of the challenges and how this has resolved them. So in terms of engineering challenges, there's the creation of those standards, and there is an out-of-the-box framework to deliver that. But with this release, it's a case of being able to build a graphic once and replicate it throughout any device. Even the entire window in terms of this client front end, this InTouch OMI front end, is not resolution dependent. So you can abstract the content from the actual devices that you're running them on. There's a very simple way to create and maintain templates in terms of the object wizards, and it sort of accommodates in that super object type approach, which I'll explain in a bit more detail. And they've also introduced an element called Allen Bradley Auto Build. So it only works for the OI server for the Allen Bradley PLCs, but you can automatically connect to your PLC and pull back the I/O points into the system. So in terms of the new interface itself, the applications actually build themselves automatically. So what they've introduced is things like applications inside of the environment, a navigation application that allows you to take the content that you designed in terms of your graphics that you designed once and put them into any device. They've done that through the use of something called content types. So you define the content type that your graphic would be, so it might be an overview screen, it might be a faceplate, it might be a detail view, and then if you associate that with an object, that is how your navigation is automatically set up through the plant model, through those objects that you create as part of System Platform. And when you associate a graphic with the object and you click on that object in terms of the navigation, the content type that you specified will display in the right panes on the screen, and that's how it designs itself and displays itself automatically. And this breaks it down a little bit further for you. So you can see that in terms of our layout there, we've got the navigation down the left-hand side. We've got the content type overview in the top. So anything that has the graphic associated with the overview type or the detail or the trend type, they'll automatically populate in that view, and you can see an example of that on the right-hand side. So there's a lot of investment protection with regards to this because the archives of graphics have been around for a long time. You take what you've already developed, you migrate it to this latest version, and you can use this new interface very, very quickly. If your plant model of your system platform application replicates your physical processes that are going on, there's a very intuitive look and feel to how that new client could look for you. And it's just a case of testing it, and it's very quick to do that. In terms of the differences in devices, we can see we've got, in terms of the colors, the different content that we can apply, and it just reorders it based on the device that you're using. You specify the screen profile that you want to deploy the application to, and then all you have to do is choose where you want that content to be in terms of the content layout, and it will display for you. And they've made the touch a lot easier to use, so they allow for multi-touch, so you can have gestures. And there's a good analogy here in relation to things like the BlackBerry smartphone. So the BlackBerry came out years and years ago, and on the keypad, which was a fully QWERTY keypad, they had a little joystick. So yes, you could access the internet, but you had to use this little fiddly joystick on in the keypad to be able to move the mouse around on the screen to be able to select things. And because it wasn't intuitive, it made it difficult, or it didn't sell that well. People stopped using it. If things aren't easy to use and intuitive to use, they stop using them. These days we have, you know, the tablets, the Android or the Apple devices that are out there. It's a very intuitive way of working. You pinch and zoom to zoom into something. You might use gesture control, so you might use 3 fingers on the screen to do a slightly different thing, particularly on things like MacBooks, or you scrunch on a tablet to close the screen. They've adopted just that straight into the app, and it's out of the box. So there's a video coming next which shows that. So we can see here we've got the desktop HD experience, and this is, as you'd expect, you use a mouse to navigate through. The navigation is much more natural with the tabs at the top and bottom that you see there, be able to put there. But if we change that then to a tablet, and we're just using a single finger operation there, and then we're pinching and zooming in, and you can see it's only that pane that's zooming in. And the resolution isn't distorted when it does that. We can change things. We can use a single finger to swipe through the different tanks. We can use 3 finger gestures to slide in panes from the right and the left hand side, or the bottom in there. And we've also in this case got, in the bottom left you can see a little button that is like a lock control. So it means that in this we've ticked a box that says we want to enable locking on the touch screen. So it means that you have to press that button before you make a touch somewhere else. It means you can't press something accidentally. In terms of the sliding panes, this is allowing for much more real estate. Typically your SCADA would have the navigation buttons always on the screen. In this case, we swipe in from the left or the right and those panes appear. And again, it's a very simple way to configure those. It isn't having to do any scripting or anything like that. You choose an option to include a sliding pane in it and choose what size you want it. In terms of investment protection, we can see the current software stack in terms of 2014 R2 and then moving to 2017, how that resides. So if you migrated from your old version up to 2017, it would migrate your InTouch application in terms of InTouch System Platform as you'd expect, exactly the same as it did previously. What we now have though is access to the InTouch OMI client as well. And when you migrate your licenses or you purchase new licenses, they've changed it so that one license will enable both clients, so that you can actually have a test and a go of the OMI client on the same machine. If we then move on to a bit about the template concepts, and this is getting into the system platform side, and if we firstly discuss the best practice approach that we've been teaching in our training courses, what we'd always say is you create a base level template that relates to every valve that is around your plant. So if your valve has only got a command and a status attribute associated with every one, that is your base template. Then if we have 3 different valves, a 2-way, a 3-way, and a 4-way, we've obviously got other things associated with it. So we derive a template from the base template. It includes the command and the status, but we then associate other attributes with those and graphics as well to be included too. And from there, we create instances of those base templates, and you can have 100 instances of each valve if you like, and that's part of the beauty of the system platform. If you then need to go and make a change to every instance, you don't have to do it at instance level, you do it at the template level and it propagates through. But we're only instantiating the things that we need because of the way that we've designed our template in the first place. Uses the right resources we need. Now, the way that it has worked in the past, or the way that some customers have used the product, is that they've designed that base template which has included every valve, the 2-way, the 3-way, and the 4-way. So everything is associated under that base template. But then when we instantiate that, the valves themselves are only actually using a very small part of each instance. So it's creating an unnecessary overhead on the system. And your instances are becoming huge, and if you do have hundreds of instances, that's an awful lot of overhead that is completely unnecessary. So what they've done with this latest release is introduce something called Object Wizards. So this allows you to get the benefit out of designing everything under a base template, so you don't have multiple derivations. But then when you instantiate the object, you choose which options you want, so that you're only ever using what you need for that instance. And then if we also have a look at the latest operations integration, so with Farrell and Bradley, they've introduced something called Auto Build, and this is a really simplified integration between PLC and system platform. It's a very quick way of getting your PLC items into system platform in a very logical manner. So I do have some videos here again, and I'm just going to show you, looking in the operations integration management interface, there's now a build option, and this will open up a user interface that allows us to connect to the PLC, and we can either do that in online or offline mode. And the offline just selects from a tag file, a PLC tag file, and we are connecting directly to a Galaxy, and we're going to have to choose the area that we want to create these objects in. So with that first screen done, it then has a look at all of the items that exist in the PLC. It's pulled them all back for us, and from here we can choose which items we'd like to import. So we can turn some of them off if we want to at the template or the instance level. This works really well if you've got a modern controller that has the right plant model structure. So it's the logical representation that you're seeing in your plant, and it works in these manners. So the simple structures, contained structures, etc. Then it shows a summary of what we're going to be importing into system platform. And then it'll ask us if we want to start building that application. So what that's then going to do is go away and pull all those items back, and it's going to go and create that object structure in the PLC inside of your objects. So you can see all those attributes that are associated with that particular template. And as part of System Platform, we now have the ability to have a look at whether we're communicating with the PLC in design time. So you can see we're now getting valid references back. So you can see we've actually pulled back nearly 7,000 references, a complete PLC map with 0 configuration in a very, very short period of time. And these drivers will come to the other PLCs too, so I know that Siemens and the Schneider PLCs are in the roadmap, but it's just on Bradbury at the moment. If we then move on to a bit about the operational challenges, and there's high maintenance costs particularly due to diverse devices. If we standardize on those device objects, this will make it simpler. So there is an automation library that exists as part of this release that will cater for 80% of your entire plant devices. So again, they're reducing that engineering time. You can eliminate downtime now due to deployment in this release because of the way that they now do the deployments. It's much more reduced risk with that. They've also introduced visual build for a different type of user, like a technician or a subcontractor coming to site, which I'll show you more detail on. And there's also further extensibility with context-sensitive applications, which I'll talk to as well. So firstly, if we look at the standardization piece, and these are the assets that come with the solution. So it's objects in terms of object wizards, where you can choose exactly what you want and design those objects, and it covers an awful lot of your automation needs. So it depends whether you're using things like pumps or fans or compressors, agitators, etc., etc. But they do exist now out of the box. In terms of deployment improvements, they've done an ability to preserve runtime changes. So in the past, you had to write out to a text file if you're doing that. So say if you've changed a set point as an example, if you just redeployed the object, it would come back with the original limit that you'd set in the object. Now what we have is the ability to tick a box that says preserve runtime changes, and then when it's restarted, it will restart with the same changes that were made in runtime. There's also, when I mentioned the no downtime due to deployments, they've introduced something called bumpless deployment. Now, if you're familiar with System Platform, you'll understand there's an engine that all of your objects run on, and these have a scan cycle. And typically, this is set to around a second, and you might have some that are slower or faster. And based on that engine scan cycle, all of the objects that you've got underneath there will need to complete its transactions within that single second. So what we've done with deployment is just change the order in which those deployments happen. So in the past, if you made a change and you hit deploy, it would undeploy the original object, so it would take it off scan, undeploy it. It would then try and deploy the changes that you'd made and then put it on scan. But if there was a problem with some of the changes that you'd made, or a problem so much so that it wouldn't even deploy, your object would be stuck in a downtime state, so it wouldn't actually be deployed to the system. What they've now done is just reverse that order. So they try and deploy the changes that you've made to the object. They then take the old one off scan and put the new one on scan in a single scan cycle of your engine. So within a second, it changes over their code bases. And then upon that being successful, it will undeploy the original. If it doesn't succeed in the deployment, then it will continue with the old one. They've also, when I mentioned about the visual build, talked a little bit about your application assembler or your technician. So there's two types of users. There's your standards developer, and this is typically a systems integrator that has a great knowledge of the system platform software, a deep understanding of the concepts, the designs, how it all works and fits together. And then the assembler is somebody that has to go and put on a new device or add something to the system. And if it was an InTouch environment, it'd probably be quite easy and intuitive for an application assembler to go and add additional tags. In a system platform environment, it's your standards developer that I'd probably have to go and make those changes, unless you've got some sort of crib sheet that allows you to deploy the right objects in the right area. With this release, they've introduced the visual build element. So what that allows us to do is go to the screen that we want to add something to. So if you think about, we've added the device to the PLC, or we've added a new PLC. we drop the graphic on the screen. So we choose from a list of all the templates that exist the graphic we want. In this case, it's just a meter. When we do that, it then pops up with a user interface that asks us questions that that user will understand. So it's a case of, do they have a set point associated with this? Yes or no? Are there rate of change alarms? Is there a deviation alarms? We're selecting yes or no, and then how do we want that to be displayed in the next screen? So do we want to have text associated with it? Do we want it to be horizontal or vertical? Do we want engineering units? These are all things that everybody understands, and then when we click finish, it will pop the graphic on the screen, but it will also create the objects in the back end in terms of system platform and deploy it to your system so you can get up and running. I also mentioned a little bit about some external applications and things that are going to be introduced with the system. This is the, looking at your IT to OT convergence. These are things that are getting released with the product. And also in terms of the development cycle, rather than having to have a full QA release for a new system platform product or, the next version release, you can now actually introduce your own applications. They're going to be releasing the SDK for that later in the year so that you can start to put your own applications in and they can start to release their own applications that allow you to get more out of the system. Really attack the real user requirements that are needed. So some of the things that are coming with this first release are the Historian Insight application is part of the system platform install, but they've introduced an application that allows you to drop it inside of a new client, and then it allows for single sign-on. So if you sign into your application, you can have single sign-on into the same application, just a natural way to be able to get between two different systems in the same environment. They've also introduced something called SCADA playback. So if on your real-time interface you've got attributes being historized to your historian, drop on the SCADA playback application and you can replay what happened over a period of time, and you can replay it at double the speed, 10 times the speed, 20 times the speed. You can pause it, you can drag through that data, you can specify the time frames that you want to see that data for. But the important thing about that is it's zero engineering. There's nothing that you need to do with it. They've also introduced maps to that environment as well, so that you can look at the natural navigation that you get from the mapping application. I've got a few videos again to show regards to this. And the Historian Insight here, and I know I've already mentioned it briefly, but it is the casual user interface, but this is the local on-premise version that we're referring to. And this one, as part of 2017, has had an update in relation to trying to bring it up online with the online interface, because it needs to go through those full QA cycles. If we then look at the SCADA playback route, and we've got the same architecture graphics that we potentially developed quite a long time ago as part of a different solution. We select the SCADA playback application at the bottom, and then we are just going to change where we want to see that, and then we're going to replay the data and we're going to speed that up as well. And there's no scripting required for that, it's just a completely out-of-the-box solution. Then if we have a look at the maps, you can locate the asset, and you could argue that you can put a map into any SCADA, and that is true, but the difference here is that you can actually dynamically change it and it automatically updates. So you could certainly put a static image inside of InTouch, and you could put graphics where you want them to reside, but you then couldn't zoom into where that map was. What we've done here is added the architecture graphics based on coordinates in terms of the map. It uses things like open maps to display those maps, and when you zoom in you get a different level of granularity. So I can choose at different zoom levels how much data I want to see. So I can see I've got a problem with that storage area, I've got an alarm there, but if I zoom in a bit further, I can see that that separates out into 3 buildings, so I can now see it's building 1 that's causing that problem. And from there, I can click on that building and it'll take me straight into that particular asset so I can see exactly where the problem lies. It's just a very neat and natural navigation and way to see and take the necessary action that you need to. Then in terms of IT challenges, it's about distributing the applications across the network, how's that done, how do we secure it, what installations do we have to do client side. Well, this latest release, there's no client installation for InTouch or My. The whole package deploys across the network. You just have to install a bootstrap so the system platform knows what that machine is, but once you've done that, you can then deploy the entire application across. In terms of performance, the hardware scalability has improved dramatically, so you can get, in terms of the latest client, many more, for example, RDS clients on a single machine. I've got some impressive figures on the next slide that show some details with regards to that. And this allows for much more system scalability. So it allows for a much larger single box solution and creates much more flexibility in terms of how we architect it. And our systems architect team are great at suggesting different ways. But if we have a look at some of the performance improvements, and we can now get you can see on the right hand side, 100,000 I/O through a single machine. And it's not a particularly a big server that is existing there. We've got an 8-core machine with 32 gig of RAM. It's also got 20,000 tags historized on that machine, 20 PLCs with 5,000 tags on each, so it's connecting to lots of different PLCs. But then we've got 20 clients on an RDP server. So it is an RDP server all running on one box. If you want redundancy, you create another box and you tick a box to say, I want to make it redundant with this one. The way that we can get much more I/O throughput through a single box is through the new and the latest OI servers that allow for multi-instance creation of those. Allows you to tie a certain number of I/O per core on your machine rather than bottlenecking through it one core like the old drivers used to do. And not to forget that this is still built on the same core technology. So if you introduce something like System Platform, we have 2 client interfaces. We still have InTouch System Platform or InTouch All My Operations Management Interface, but you can still bolt on the rest of the product stack. So you can still do alarm analysis, you can still make everything mobile, you can still do things like MES for your overall equipment effectiveness. You can do things like batch management or business process management, or even get down to things like business analytics with something like intelligence. It's the same core technology that we're using here. On the same topic, I suppose, if we look at the RDS and the different products we use, you probably know that we are a supplier of Theme Manager. So Theme Manager is still very much the way that we'd recommend managing that RDS interface, how you deploy and suggest which applications go to which devices around the plant. And you can make those more secure by location if you want to, through some of the great features in Theme Manager. But if you are using RDS, I still urge you to use a product like Theme Manager to be able to manage that, to make it much simpler for you. So then just to summarize, what we're doing with this is creating much more out of the box in terms of standardization, being able to create a complete automation library out of the box, build it once, so you probably already got Architecture graphics you can reuse across all of the systems that you've got. You can empower more people, reduce the operator fatigue. You've got much more in terms of the applications being context-driven, much more intuitive. You're empowering people to be able to, react to adverse situations much quicker and make continuous improvements as well. and there's much more agility in this release, so being able to do things like visual build for the technicians of the world or the contractors, being able to do updates with stage redeployments, eliminating that downtime in that. And you've probably seen these few phrases throughout some of the marketing campaigns, like easy to build, easy to use, and easy to own. So we are building once and deploying to any device through a pre-built set of standards or standards that you engineer inside of the application. It's much easier to use, so we're reducing that technical knowledge barrier in terms of that. There's a much more modern user interface, much more intuitive, and it's very easy to own, so you can maintain it easier, you can minimize downtime, you can update the system easier. Everything is becoming easier to use. So I just want to finish on what system platform is our enterprise HMI SCADA, which still speaks to that open connectivity that we see. It's very, very highly scalable, and it is an easy-to-use platform. And this is just a video just to close on.
This is what we've been waiting for. A first-of-its-kind operations management interface that turns engineers into design wizards and applications into agility. This is where immersive user experiences touch more corners of your organization, and responsive content empowers innovation at every level. System Platform 2017 featuring InTouch OMI, the easy-to-build, easy-to-use, easy-to-own control platform for supervisory, SCADA, MES, and the industrial IoT.
Thank you very much for joining us, and look forward to seeing you soon. Thank you.